How does a prince end up being told, in no uncertain terms, to get lost and never return? That's not a tabloid headline. That's what a senior UK court ruling has effectively said to Prince Harry, formerly His Royal Highness, formerly the public's golden boy, now a man standing on the other side of a locked gate. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And not just any gate. The gate of the very country he once called home. The nation where he was born, raised, adored. The kingdom of his ancestors. Now reduced to nothing more than a distant land that has slammed the door shut in his face. Judicially, legally, and emotionally. And yet, here's the haunting question. Why now? Why, after all the drama, all the interviews, all the exiles and exposés? Why is this the moment that broke him? There's a clip, grainy, hastily recorded by a paparazzi lens, that captures Prince Harry sitting alone in the back seat of a black vehicle outside the court. His hands are trembling, his eyes red, his face contorted into the sort of expression we rarely, if ever, associate with the British royals. Not stoic, not unreadable, not detached, just raw despair. You can almost hear the word forming on his lips. Why? But the better question is, what happened inside that courtroom that made Harry crumble the way he did? This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to him. He had a legal team. He had resources. He had precedent. He had royal blood. And yet, the gavel dropped. The judge ruled. And in just a few brutal lines of judicial language, the United Kingdom made one thing chillingly clear. Prince Harry is not welcome here anymore. No royal exemption. No security reconsideration. No diplomatic reentry. Done. But here's what the public doesn't know. This wasn't just about legal technicalities or policy disputes. This wasn't some dry squabble over taxpayer-funded security details or bureaucratic travel restrictions. No, this was deeply personal. This was about power, control, betrayal, and perhaps most of all, revenge. What if I told you that, behind closed doors, this entire legal process had been quietly influenced by shadow figures within the palace? That someone very high up had made it their mission to ensure Harry never sets foot on UK soil again. Not as a prince, not as a civilian, not as anything? What if this ruling was the final chess move in a game that's been played for years? And what if Harry, emotional, desperate, blindsided, never saw it coming? Let's rewind. This entire saga began not with a ruling, but with a plea. Prince Harry, frustrated by the rejection of his requests for personal protection while visiting the UK, decided to take the British government to court. He argued that he, and by extension his family, deserved security, especially considering his high-profile status and the very real threats he continues to face. But the judge wasn't buying it. Why? Because behind that legal argument was something deeper, something toxic. Years of media scandals, Oprah interviews, book deals, Netflix specials, public digs at the monarchy. A war of words played out across continents. And now, it seems, the British establishment has had enough. So when the ruling came down, dismissing Harry's request with sharp, almost unprecedented finality, it wasn't just a legal decision. It was a message. And it wasn't just coming from the court. It was coming from the crown. Because here's where things get darker. Fast. Sources close to the legal proceedings say that confidential evidence, never made public, was submitted to the court by a third party with direct ties to Buckingham Palace. Think about that for a second. Who submitted those sealed documents? What did they contain? And why did they shift the tide so completely against Harry? Now, remember, this is a man who once walked behind his mother's coffin while the whole world watched. A boy who was forged in the crucible of grief, who went to war, who tried to live a life of service, who said he was stepping back, not stepping away. And now, he's being told to stay away. Forever. Let that sink in. This isn't a suspension. This is exile. And it's legal, judicial, institutionalized. But maybe the most brutal part? He didn't see it coming. There's a moment caught by reporters, seconds after the ruling. Harry, pacing, visibly trembling, looking down at his phone as if waiting for a message that would never come. Did he expect a text from his father? A call from William? A statement from the palace? Nothing came. Radio silence. Because this was coordinated. And it had been in motion long before Harry ever booked his flight or filed his legal paperwork. And if you think that sounds paranoid, ask yourself this. Why did Princess Anne suddenly appear at a security briefing the week before the ruling? Why did King Charles cancel his private lunch with Harry during the last UK trip? Why did William fly to Balmoral that weekend and leave his phone off? Coincidences? Or calculated distancing? Let's not forget the British press. As soon as the ruling hit the news wires, the headlines weren't just celebratory. They were vicious. Royal traitor denied UK return. Judge tells Harry, stay gone. Windsor wall slams shut. The messaging was clear and coordinated. But here's the most disturbing twist of all. This ruling doesn't just block Harry from receiving police protection while in the UK. It sets a precedent. It defines him, legally, as an individual with no special standing, no privileges, no reason to be treated differently than any other ex-royal. Which means, even if he wanted to return permanently someday, he couldn't. Not without begging. Not without bending the knee. Not without giving something up. And you better believe that's the point. Because this isn't just legal warfare. It's symbolic punishment. It's the monarchy saying, you left. You exposed us. You embarrassed us. And now, you pay the price. But this leaves us with an even more haunting question. What happens next? Does Harry go quiet? Retreat into California obscurity with Meghan and the kids? Or does he fight back? With a vengeance? Will there be another book? Another interview? Another bombshell? Because make no mistake, he's furious. And humiliated. And heartbroken. And there's nothing more dangerous than a prince with nothing left to lose. We're just getting started. Because what happened outside that courthouse is only the surface. Inside, there were secret testimonies, confidential communications, and a judge who issued one of the most unprecedented rulings in modern royal legal history. And there's more, much more. Because in the very next chapter, we're going to expose the private conversation Harry had in the hallway, moments before the judgment. A conversation that changed everything. And someone was listening. Someone with an agenda. Someone with power. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What exactly did Prince Harry hear in that final courtroom hallway that made him crumble? Because what happened after the judgment was already shocking. But what happened right before? That's where the real drama exploded. You see, while the cameras waited outside, while reporters prepped their microphones and the press pool gathered with hungry anticipation, Prince Harry was standing alone. The courtroom hadn't been officially dismissed yet. His lawyers were already packing up their briefcases, nodding coldly to the other side. Meghan wasn't there. She had remained in California. And that's when someone approached him. We still don't know the identity of this figure. Some say it was a court liaison. Others suggest it was someone authorized from the palace. One particularly explosive theory? It was a legal representative from inside the royal household, someone who had worked directly under Queen Elizabeth II. But what matters most is what was said. According to two separate insiders, both with access to the hallway during this private moment, the message delivered to Harry was short, brutal, and haunting. Your return to the UK is no longer viable. It's over. 6 words. But they detonated everything. Because until that very second, Harry had held on to a sliver of hope. That somehow, through legal wrangling, compromise, or royal guilt, the door might remain ajar. That even if this ruling went against him, he could still visit in some limited capacity. That there was still a thread of connection. That he was still family. But this wasn't just a loss. It was a severance. Viable return? Gone. He was being cut out. Quietly. Permanently. And just as those words landed, Harry reportedly looked up, shaken, unblinking, and whispered something under his breath that no one quite caught. One observer swears it was, they've all turned. Another insists it was simpler. I'm done. Either way, what followed next was captured by the cameras, and has already been splashed across every tabloid from London to Los Angeles. Prince Harry walking briskly, almost stumbling. Out of the side entrance, his head down, hand gripping the car door. The moment he climbed into the back seat, his expression collapsed. Not a royal poker face, not a polished public mask, but real, visible, human grief. His eyes were puffy, lips trembling, shoulders hunched. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a nod to the press. He just sat and cried. It wasn't the cry of a man defeated in court. It was the cry of a man who realized he had no home to return to. Now here's where it gets colder. As Harry sat alone in that car, wiping his face, shielding himself from cameras. Guess what was happening just a few miles away? A strategy meeting inside Clarence's house. Yes, while Harry was mourning the final thread of royal connection, key figures in the palace were reportedly meeting to finalize a public response. But they never released one. Why? Because silence is more damning. It says, we don't need to acknowledge you anymore. And worse, it says, we've moved on. Let's pause and consider that. Prince Harry, the boy who once stood beside William in full military dress at Trooping the Color, the son of Diana, the man who flew Apache helicopters over Afghanistan for Queen and country, now a ghost. No statement, no rebuttal, no sympathy, just silence. And as that silence thundered in his ears, Harry's team reportedly tried to intercept the fallout. His lead lawyer was seen on the phone, visibly agitated. An assistant was whispering into a burner device. Meghan, meanwhile, remained out of sight, her location undisclosed. Some say she was in Montecito, frantically coordinating a PR pivot. Others believe she was in New York, already in talks with media reps about setting the record straight. But the truth is, Meghan hadn't expected Harry to break down. Not like this. According to insiders, she believed he would keep it together, focus on next steps, reframe the loss as a diplomatic complication. What she didn't predict was the emotional implosion. Because Harry wasn't just humiliated. He was lost. And what he did next shocked even his closest aides. He texted his father. Directly. Yes, after months of no contact, following leaks, ghosted invites, and ignored holidays, Harry reached out to King Charles. And the message was short. Please call me. Just for 5 minutes. That's it. No demands. No threats. No drama. Just one final plea. The kind of text that reads more like a son than a duke. And here's the cruel twist. Charles didn't reply. Not then. Not that day. Not even a week later. We'll get to why later in the series. But for now, understand this. That unanswered text broke something in Harry. Because for all the press headlines and Netflix deals, all the declarations of independence and claims of freedom, he never truly let go of the idea that, one day, he might be welcomed back. That he could stand in Windsor again. Be part of the family again. But not anymore. This ruling wasn't just about police security or Home Office jurisdiction. It was a mirror. A final reflection of where he stood. Outside. Alone. Forgotten. Now let's look at the imagery again. As Harry's car pulled away from the court, he looked up briefly. One single glance toward the crowd. And just behind the press line, a protester held up a crude sign. It read, "Just leave, Harry. Get lost." A phrase that echoed the unofficial sentiment of the judgment itself. Was it a coincidence? Or a cruel cosmic joke? Either way, Harry saw it. And the look on his face was devastating. Not rage. Not defiance. Just resignation. But before we move to what came next, here's something the public never saw. A voicemail. Yes, just hours before the ruling, Harry left a private voice memo for a former royal aide, a woman who had worked with him during his Invictus Games planning days. In it, his tone was subdued. Almost numb. He said, quote, "If this goes how I think it will, I just want to say thank you. You always tried. Even when others didn't." End quote. That doesn't sound like a man plotting his next legal move. That sounds like a goodbye. So now the question becomes, what is next? Will Harry double down? Will he appeal? Will he expose who submitted those confidential documents to the court? Or will he disappear? Because when that car drove off, silent, slow, tinted, it felt less like a retreat and more like an ending. But don't be fooled. Because just as Harry left that courtroom, devastated and blindsided, a second bombshell was already being prepared behind palace doors. One that could make this judgment look tame by comparison. And it has everything to do with who helped the judge reach that decision. A silent figure. A royal name. A strategist with no public-facing title, but enormous power behind the scenes. And when you find out who it is, it will shatter everything you thought you knew about the royal family's internal loyalties. Because the betrayal didn't start in the courtroom. It started years ago, in the family itself. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the courtroom we saw wasn't the real battlefield? What if Prince Harry's fate was sealed not during that dramatic final hearing, but in a secret session days earlier, where neither cameras nor press were allowed, where records were sealed, and where one silent royal figure delivered the final blow. Because as it turns out, the judge's shocking public ruling wasn't the beginning. It was the end of a private process, one deliberately hidden from public scrutiny. A process that rewrote the rules of engagement against Harry. And the worst part? He didn't even see it coming. Here's what really happened. 3 days before the public ruling, while the world believed Harry's legal team was preparing to present final arguments in open court, an emergency session was quietly called behind closed doors. Only 4 people were reportedly in that room: the judge, a government security advisor, a senior palace legal liaison, and a mysterious 5th figure whose identity remains redacted in all official records. Yes, redacted. Even in a system obsessed with transparency, even in a case involving a former royal, there exists an entry in the court transcript marked simply as private contributor, title sealed. Let that chill settle in for a moment. Someone entered that courtroom with special legal privilege. Someone not accountable to the public. Someone with clearance, but no name. Now ask yourself, who could that be? A former MI5 liaison? A royal intelligence officer? Or a member of the royal family itself, acting under legal protection? Here's where things get even more disturbing. This secret session wasn't about debating Harry's right to security. That had already been discussed, endlessly, in the months leading up to the ruling. No, this was about Harry himself, his character, his threats, his reputation. In short, it was a strategic assassination of Prince Harry's credibility. According to a leak, buried in a redacted journalist's court log, this secret session involved the submission of classified royal communications, detailing numerous instances in which Harry allegedly breached confidential security protocols during past visits to the UK. Think about that. This wasn't about his right to be protected. This was about painting him as a liability. A man too reckless to trust with armed officers. A man who had, allegedly, undermined his own safety in order to win media attention. One memo reportedly described Harry's behavior during the Platinum Jubilee, stating he refused to follow planned ingress routes and was non-compliant with last-minute protective adjustments, allegedly causing exposure of security patterns to hostile entities. That language, so cold, so clinical, is designed to do one thing: disqualify. To portray him not as a victim of threat, but as the threat himself. But here's the kicker. This information didn't come from paparazzi, or tabloids, or rogue sources. It came from inside the palace, which means one of two things. The royal family directly authorized a legal campaign to discredit Harry's attempts to secure protection. Or worse, someone acted unilaterally, using their influence to cut Harry off for good. Now, ask yourself, who would do that? Who has the connections? The motive? The cold-blooded determination? You might be thinking, William. But here's the twist: it wasn't him. Not this time. According to confidential legal chatter overheard by a court clerk and later leaked to a legal blog, the 5th figure in that room was described only as a female representative bearing sovereign authority. And that has set the rumor mill on fire. Because only 2 women in the royal orbit would qualify under that kind of description: Princess or Queen Camilla. And if it was one of them, if one of those 2 women stepped into that courtroom behind a shield of legal anonymity, then this isn't just a royal feud anymore. It's a royal strike. The monarchy defending itself by erasing one of its own. Let's dig deeper. Why would such a high-ranking royal involve themselves in a legal case so controversial? Why risk the exposure? Why take the nuclear option? Because from their perspective, Harry had crossed every red line. Let's not forget the Oprah interview, the Netflix docuseries, the spare memoir, the podcast appearances, the subtle digs, the outright accusations. Accusations of racism, of cruelty, of betrayal. He hadn't just left the institution. He'd set it on fire. And from inside those palace walls, the one threat worse than a bitter ex-royal is a loose one. That's why this secret hearing existed in the first place. Not to evaluate Harry's safety, but to eliminate his standing. Make no mistake, the strategy was genius. Diabolical, yes, but effective. Because rather than argue the law in public, where Harry might win sympathy, they introduced a confidential risk profile. In legal terms, they reclassified Harry, not as a former dignitary, but as a private individual with a pattern of behavior deemed incompatible with royal security resources. That phrasing alone strips him of leverage. Because once that label is applied, it doesn't matter if he's a prince or a postman. He's out. He's done. Now here's the punch in the gut. Harry wasn't told this was happening. Not in real time. Not by his lawyers. And certainly not by his family. He found out, according to insiders, through a subtle phrase in the judge's final ruling. Upon private advisement by sovereign-affiliated parties, this court recognizes the unique challenges presented by the applicant's behavioral inconsistencies during state-level protection deployments. Read it again. Private advisement. Sovereign-affiliated parties. Translation. The palace told us not to trust you. Now tell me, how do you come back from that? The answer is, you don't. That's why Harry's reaction outside the courthouse wasn't anger. It was grief. Because the betrayal didn't come from a judge. It came from his own blood. And it wasn't just legal, it was strategic. Let's pause here and ask, was this even legal? Can a monarch, or royal figure, intervene in this way without public disclosure? Technically, yes. The UK operates under a constitutional monarchy, which means certain royal privileges, especially surrounding security, national interest, and diplomatic precedent, can remain sealed indefinitely under the royal prerogative, which is exactly what was used to shield the identity of the fifth figure. A centuries-old legal maneuver used to ensure the monarchy always remains above the mess. But in doing so, they've created something even more dangerous. A constitutional ghost. A royal force operating in shadows. Unchallenged, unelected, and unstoppable. Now let's revisit Harry's final moments in that courtroom hallway. Why was he so destroyed? Because someone had told him, just minutes before the ruling, that the case had been fixed. Yes, fixed. That word reportedly came from a sympathetic junior clerk who whispered to Harry's aide as they crossed paths in the corridor. It was decided earlier. You never had a chance. And when Harry heard that, when he realized he'd walked into a room with a locked outcome, he knew he wasn't just fighting for a court ruling. He was fighting for dignity. And he lost. But there's one detail no one's reported yet. In the judge's sealed notes, according to a leak from a courthouse staffer, there's mention of a post-hearing correspondence sent directly to the Home Office marked Royal 3, Comply. That label, Royal 3, is believed to refer to a senior tier of Royal Advisory Protocol. And comply means enforce it. No wiggle room. No appeal. No room for diplomacy. So now Harry's stuck. Legally disarmed. Institutionally exiled. And emotionally shattered. But here's where the fire starts to burn again. Because while the UK slammed the door shut, someone in the US is opening a new one. Yes. In the hours following the ruling, Meghan was spotted arriving at a private property in Bel Air, reportedly the location of a media mogul's estate. The same mogul who helped broker the Sussex's Netflix deal. And according to insiders, they're preparing a response. Not a press release, not a tweet, but something bigger. A retaliation. A controlled burn, as one aide called it. Because Harry might be blocked from the UK legally, but not from the court of public opinion. And as Meghan gears up to flip the script, another battle is about to begin. A global one. But before that happens, something even darker is looming. Because there's still one figure who hasn't spoken. One figure who hasn't made a single public appearance since the ruling. A figure whose silence is beginning to speak volumes. And when she finally makes her move, it could change the future of the monarchy forever. Because while Harry weeps and the palace plots, Princess Anne is sharpening the blade. And her next strike? No one is ready for it. What happens when a country you once served with pride, fought for, cried for, almost died for, officially declares you persona non grata? Not figuratively, not symbolically, legally, because that's exactly what happened to Prince Harry. In a stunning, blisteringly worded judgment, the UK royal court didn't just deny him police protection, it essentially stripped him of all remaining dignity as a former working royal. Let's not sugarcoat it. This wasn't a technical rejection. It was a rejection of him. A formal statement, framed in the language of law but drenched in years of frustration, institutional memory, and veiled resentment. Telling the Duke of Sussex, you left, you went too far, and you're not welcome back. Ever. Now let's break this down. The public judgment dropped at 10 a.m. London time. Immediately, Reporters outside the courtroom began reading out the lines live on air. But it wasn't until one particular phrase was spoken aloud that jaws started dropping, not just across Britain, but across the world. The claimant's expectation of access to royal and state resources, despite his self-imposed departure from active duty, is incompatible with the principles of sovereign security and public policy. Stop. Reread that. Incompatible. That word hit like a thunderclap. Because what it means, in plain English, is this. Prince Harry is now officially classified as an outsider. A private citizen. A man with no claim, no standing, no access. Not just to police escort cars, but to the institution he was born into. And the legal language didn't stop there. The court document continued. While familial ties persist, constitutional distinction has been severed. Accordingly, no expectation of privileged treatment can be maintained. This is unprecedented. A judge using the term severed to describe the bond between a royal figure and the constitutional body he once represented? That's not just a denial. That's a eulogy. And for Harry, it hit harder than he ever expected. According to a source inside his legal team, the moment those words were read aloud, his expression changed completely. Gone was the calm determination he'd tried to maintain all morning. His hands began to shake. He clenched his jaw. And then, most shocking of all, he muttered, audibly, for all in the courtroom to hear. This isn't justice. This is punishment. Punishment. Let that word sink in. Because whether he realized it or not, Harry had nailed the exact sentiment that has been brewing within the establishment for years. This wasn't just about law. This was about consequence. But here's the part that truly broke him. The next section of the ruling directly addressed his military service. Yes, his service. His time in Afghanistan. His leadership with the Invictus Games. His work with wounded veterans. All of it, reduced to a footnote. The court's summary noted. While the claimant's prior military service is acknowledged with respect, it cannot override the claimant's current classification as a private individual under law. Translation? Thanks for your service, but you're just Harry now. Not Captain Wales. Not Duke of Sussex. Not son of the future king. Just Harry. It was the coldest slap of all. Because if anything could have preserved his standing, it was that, his genuine, decorated, and dangerous military duty. But the system didn't flinch. And the moment the ruling hit social media, the reaction was immediate and polarizing. Across the UK, hashtags exploded. Hashtag Get Lost Harry. Hashtag Not Welcome Back. Hashtag Royal Ruling. Hashtag No Return. Some of it was cruel. Some of it was celebratory. Some of it was cautiously supportive. But one thing was clear. The nation had taken a side. And it wasn't Harry's. Within hours, media outlets had published scorching headlines. Judge slams door on Prince Harry, forever. UK court to Harry. You chose California, now stay there. Windsor exile sealed in stone. But the most brutal one? The Daily Express led with a headline that would go viral in minutes. Just leave. Yes, those exact 2 words, printed in bold, with a photo of Harry's devastated face as he exited the courthouse. The same words shouted by protesters outside. The same phrase seen on signs. The same phrase whispered in political circles, government offices, and yes, even within the walls of Buckingham Palace. Just leave. So what was the response from royal aides? Nothing. No comment. No clarification. No defense. Silence. And when silence follows a public crucifixion, that silence becomes complicity. It tells the world, we stand by this. Which begs the question, was this all choreographed? Because let's look at the timing. The court ruling was released just days after King Charles's scheduled meeting with senior advisors. One which Harry was allegedly disinvited from after last-minute pressure from within the palace. Coincidence? Or part of a larger strategy? Insiders now believe this ruling wasn't just anticipated, it was engineered. And not just by government lawyers, but by key royal players who, tired of Harry's independence, decided it was time to end the story for good. To end the threat. And what better way than through the courts? Because a judge's ruling doesn't just stop Harry from returning with state support. It damages his brand, his narrative, his global credibility. Remember, Harry's story has always been framed as the royal underdog, the spare who broke free, the prince who wanted to protect his family. But how does that story hold up when a UK judge, based on confidential advisement, essentially brands him as an unfit recipient of even basic state protection? How do you sell security when the court says you're the problem? This isn't just personal. It's financial. It's strategic. It's the slow-motion collapse of Harry's international persona. Now, here's a development no one expected. As the ruling spread, high-profile American figures began to weigh in. A-list celebrities, former diplomats, even political commentators. And while some defended Harry, a surprising number echoed a similar sentiment. Maybe he's gone too far. This is the danger zone. Because once the American public begins to question Harry's credibility, the very empire he and Meghan have tried to build in California begins to crack. Netflix? They're silent. Spotify? Gone. Archwell? Struggling to stay relevant. And now, no UK fallback. No ancestral home. No welcome mat at Frogmore. Just a ruling. And a warning. Because buried deep in the judgment is one more terrifying sentence that went largely unnoticed. The court recommends due diligence be conducted should future attempts be made to re-establish sovereign linkage by the claimant. Future attempts. Re-establish sovereign linkage. In other words, if Harry ever tries to reintegrate, to reclaim status, to reconnect with royal authority, he will face resistance. Legally, institutionally, permanently. And this line wasn't hypothetical. It was preventative. The system is making sure he stays out. So what's next for Harry? Can he appeal? Technically, yes. But practically, it's dead on arrival. Because any appeal would require new evidence, new arguments, and an institution willing to engage. And right now, the palace isn't just refusing to engage. They're quietly celebrating. According to a palace insider, one senior royal was overheard saying the night of the ruling, "Finally, he got what he asked for." Cold, but not surprising. Because for years, the royal family has been quietly waiting for the moment when they could stop reacting and start shutting the door. And now, with the help of a legally binding judgment, they've done just that. But Harry isn't the only one affected. There's a ripple effect. Archie, Lilibet, their eligibility for UK privileges, their inheritance, their connection to their royal lineage, all now in question. Because when the court says severed, it doesn't just mean Harry's security. It means his family's future relationship with the monarchy is officially fractured. And guess what? Someone made sure that fracture became permanent. Someone whispered in the judge's ear, submitted the sealed letters, pushed the final button. And in the next chapter, we're going to find out who. Because this betrayal didn't happen in a vacuum. It was calculated, precise, personal. And when the truth comes out, it will shatter what's left of Harry's royal illusion. Because someone in that palace wants him gone. Not just from Britain, but from history. And they're closer than you think. What if the person most responsible for driving the final nail into Prince Harry's royal coffin wasn't King Charles, wasn't Camilla, wasn't William, but Anne? Yes, Princess Anne. The quiet one, the stoic one, the workhorse, royal who rarely speaks to the press, never leaks, never indulges the drama. But behind those famously cold eyes and clipped sentences lies something much more dangerous than Meghan Markle ever accounted for. Strategy, precision, and an unshakable loyalty to the institution over family. Because make no mistake, and may be silent, but she is far from passive. And now, insiders are beginning to piece together a picture so shocking, it's turning royal watchers inside out. And didn't just support the court's decision to block Harry's return. She helped architect it. Let's rewind. 3 weeks before the ruling, a private security summit took place at an undisclosed royal estate. Not in London, not at Balmoral, but in the countryside. The guest list was short. A Home Office official, a palace legal advisor, a former intelligence director, and Princess Anne. Eyebrows raised. Why was she there? She holds no constitutional position related to national security, no public role in royal legal matters. And yet, she was at the table. And according to a source who overheard fragments of that meeting from a nearby room, she spoke with what can only be described as chilling clarity. He made his choice. We must ensure he cannot unmake it. That sentence hung in the air. Not angry, not dramatic, just firm, final. And, it turns out, had grown weary of the Harry Megxit saga long before most of the public did. Insiders say she considered the Oprah interview an unforgivable violation of trust. She viewed the Netflix series as self-indulgent propaganda. And the book Spare? She refused to read it, reportedly calling it a child's tantrum in hardcover. But her real fury, ice-cold, calculated, was ignited by one particular moment. A leaked excerpt in which Harry compared senior royals' treatment of Meghan to how and herself had once been treated by the press. "They've learned nothing," he wrote. "Not from the years, not from Diana, not from Meghan." That line, meant to draw sympathy, did the exact opposite. It made him furious, because to her, there was no comparison. She had endured criticism, yes. Racism? No. She had suffered invasion. But she stayed, worked, served, and most importantly, she never aired it out on American television. So to see Harry equate Meghan's struggles with her own, it was an insult. And she didn't forget. According to palace staff, she began meeting privately with royal attorneys shortly after that book hit the shelves. Not with bluster, with folders, documents, timelines, and approached the matter like a military operation. Step 1. Establish legal precedent that Harry is now a private citizen. Step 2. Neutralize any remaining soft power he holds by reframing him as a national security liability. Step 3. Ensure the final decision is made through judicial channels, not royal decree, so that the monarchy's hands remain clean. And it worked. Brilliantly. Because here's the twist. And never issued a single public statement. Never leaked to the press. Never smiled for the cameras, and whispered, sources say. She played the long game. And the court ruling? That was her checkmate. Now let's talk about optics. On the morning the decision was announced, Princess Anne was spotted at a community center in northern England, shaking hands, chatting with schoolchildren, business as usual. No comment on the ruling. No nod to the headlines. But when asked casually by a journalist how she felt about recent developments, and paused, just for a second, and then delivered the coldest response imaginable. "I feel the institution is intact. That's all that matters. That's all that matters." A phrase that echoes like a death knell for Harry's royal ambitions. Because in Anne's worldview, personal feelings are irrelevant. Tears don't count. Emotions don't override duty. And Harry had failed the duty test. Spectacularly. Now, here's a detail that slipped under the radar, but not for long. The day after the ruling, an internal memo circulated among senior palace staff. It was short, just one paragraph. But the subject line? Post-ruling Protocol Consolidation Directive AA1. AA. And sources have confirmed that this memo came directly from the Princess Royal's private office. The directive? To immediately update all internal royal engagement protocols to reflect Prince Harry's non-status. What does that mean? He is to be excluded from all future family invitations involving state property. He is to receive no briefings, no notices, no ceremonial deference. He is not to be referred to by title in official internal correspondence. In short, he no longer exists within the system. And that policy wasn't initiated by Charles, or Camilla, or William. It came from Anne. But why now? Why push so hard, so publicly, so finally? Because according to a former palace strategist, Anne had one terrifying prediction, and she was determined to prevent it. She believed Harry was preparing to return, not full-time, not officially, but symbolically, to force his way back into the royal narrative. How? By leveraging future events, funerals, coronations, family illnesses, as re-entry points. Not in title, but in presence. Once he's back on UK soil, even as a guest, the press will start re-normalizing him, and warned, per the insider. And once the press normalizes him, the public won't be far behind. That was the scenario Anne feared. The slow drip, the emotional manipulation, the comeback arc. And so she shut the door. Legally, emotionally, institutionally. And she did it without ever raising her voice. Now here's the most ironic part. And has been one of the most beloved royals in recent years. Quiet. Steady. Respected. But this power move, this revelation that she was the one who advised the palace legal team on how to box Harry out, it's transformed her image overnight. On social media, supporters are calling her the real Iron Lady. Memes are popping up of and playing chess while the rest play checkers. And among royal loyalists, her stock has soared. Because they see her not as cruel, but as courageous. The one who did what Charles wouldn't, what William couldn't, what Camilla dared not attempt, and what Meghan never saw coming. Because here's the thing. In the Sussex strategy manual, and didn't exist. She wasn't flashy, wasn't gossiped about, wasn't a headline generator. But she was watching, quietly, calculating. And when the time came to act, she didn't fight with words. She fought with policy, and won. Now let's return to Harry. Because as he sat in that car, crying silently, staring at a phone that refused to light up with a reply from his father, and was already 2 steps ahead, her office had sent out a new travel advisory to all senior royals. In the event of coordinated gatherings on royal estates, no logistical planning shall include consideration for the Duke of Sussex unless formal invitation is initiated through sovereign channels. Which, in ant speak, means, don't even ask. He's out. But here's the final gut punch. And isn't finished. According to recent reports, she's quietly lobbying for a royal protocol amendment. One that would formalize Harry's removal from future ceremonial orders of precedence, even as a non-working royal. That means no place in royal processions, no seating at coronation-level events, no honors at funerals, no flag on the coffin, nothing. Gone. So while Harry mourns what was lost, and is making sure it stays buried, permanently, but just as she thinks the institution has been secured, just as she sharpens the final blade, there's one element and didn't calculate for. Because back in Montecito, someone else is watching all of this unfold. Someone who sees opportunity in tragedy. A strategist of her own kind. And Meghan? She's ready to retaliate. What if King Charles knew this was going to happen, long before the ruling ever reached the courtroom? What if he didn't just let it happen, but quietly prepared for it? And what if hidden among his private journals, he left behind thoughts that prove this wasn't just a legal decision, but an emotional reckoning years in the making? Because what's now coming to light, through palace leaks, intercepted notes, and former staff revelations, is that Charles has been documenting the unraveling of his relationship with Prince Harry for years. And the latest entries, written in his unmistakable fountain pen script, are more revealing than any public statement he's ever made. They tell a story not just of disappointment, but of strategic detachment. A monarch caught between his duty to the crown and the sun who keeps trying to burn it down. Let's dive into what Charles really wrote. First, some background. Every monarch, dating back to Queen Victoria, has kept a personal diary. Not a memoir, not a press release. A handwritten record of their inner world, emotions, frustrations, decisions made in silence. Queen Elizabeth's diaries were legendary, stored securely in Windsor, accessible only to a select few after her death. Charles inherited the practice, and according to 2 palace insiders, he's been especially diligent in the years since the Megxit split. Now, a former valet, who left the king's service shortly after the coronation, has begun sharing fragments of those private writings with a small circle of journalists. Not the full entries, not page scans, but transcriptions. And what they reveal about the king's internal state during the fallout with Harry is breathtaking. Take this entry, dated March 7, 2021, the night after the Oprah interview aired. I hardly recognize the boy I once carried through the Balmoral garden. He speaks of cruelty, yet he forgets how we held him after Diana, how we shielded him from the weight of it all. That tone, grief tinted with anger, is consistent throughout the entries. But what's more revealing is what Charles doesn't say. Nowhere does he deny Harry's pain. Nowhere does he minimize the emotional collapse within the family. But over and over, he expresses the same sentiment. He has made himself a stranger. What am I to do with a son who treats me as an institution rather than a father? That's the core wound. Not the Netflix special, not the book, not even the security lawsuit, but the fact that Harry stopped seeing his father as a human being and started seeing him as a symbol to attack. Charles doesn't lash out in his notes. There are no insults, no tabloid-level rage. What there is sorrow. A kind of exhausted detachment. A man who has stopped waiting for reconciliation and started documenting the damage. Let's fast forward to February 2024, just months before the court ruling. One entry, described by the valet as especially cold, reads, "He comes not to reconcile, but to win, to perform. Every visit feels like a stage play written by someone else." That line hit the royal aides hard. because it shows that by then, Charles had already stopped viewing Harry's trips to the UK as genuine. He saw them as PR missions, legal stunts, media narratives disguised as family moments. And so he began planning accordingly. According to internal staff chatter, Charles quietly instructed his team to revise all potential event matrices to exclude Prince Harry. Translation: if a royal funeral occurred, Harry would not be automatically invited. If a family wedding was planned, Harry's name would not be included in the preliminary seating arrangements. And if national tragedy struck, requiring the family to make a united appearance, Harry would not be briefed. And that instruction? It was reportedly codified in a royal memo titled Contingency Planning, Sussex Non-Engagement Protocols, approved by the king himself. But here's where things get even more brutal. One page from the diary, dated just days before the final court ruling, includes a passage so sharp, aides reportedly debated whether to destroy it. Here's what the transcription reads. He will cry, I think, not out of love, but because the theater has ended. The doors are closing, and he must finally sit with the consequences of choices made in the dark. Chilling, because Charles wasn't just predicting the reaction. He was orchestrating it. He knew the court would rule against Harry. He knew the palace's submission of confidential evidence would tip the scale. And he accepted it, wrote about it, even justified it. The crown cannot be held hostage by affection. If love makes one blind to threat, then duty must restore the balance. That's not the writing of a grieving father. That's the mind of a monarch. And therein lies the emotional contradiction that's been haunting Charles for years. He is both father and king, blood and crown. But the deeper Harry drifted into public rebellion, Meghan at his side, the press in his pocket, the more Charles was forced to shift from father mode to fortress mode. He didn't do it suddenly. He did it in entries, notes, private reflections, until eventually, love became liability. And liability had to be neutralized. So what did Charles do? He stopped returning Harry's calls. He stopped defending him at Privy Council briefings. He authorized, tacitly or not, the slow removal of Harry's name from public documents. And when the court request came in from Harry's legal team, seeking to reinstate police protection, Charles's office submitted a confidential advisement to the Home Office, not blocking Harry, per se, but confirming the palace would not support the request. That decision was his. It wasn't loud. It wasn't leaked. It was delivered with the same pen he used to write. My son has become a stranger, and strangers do not hold keys to the gates of Windsor. Now here's the final blow. An aide working inside Clarence House reported that, after the ruling was announced and Harry's emotional photos began flooding the news cycle, Charles made no public comment. But he did add one line in that day's journal entry. Just 6 words. He cried. But the door remains closed. There is no plan for reconciliation. No secret summit. No backchannel talks. Because Charles has already moved on. And as one source put it, the king has mourned his son while he's still alive. A brutal truth, but an undeniable one. Because these diary entries prove what the public has suspected but the palace would never say. Charles didn't just let the system erase Harry. He handed it the pen. So now the question is, what will Harry do with this? Will he finally understand how far he's fallen? Will he lash out? Will Meghan twist these revelations into a new narrative? Or will Harry, for the first time in his life, accept that the fairy tale is over? One thing is certain. Those pages, those inked words penned in silence, are more permanent than any title. And as they rest behind locked drawers in a palace study, they may one day become public. But not yet, because someone else now holds copies of those diary fragments. Someone who plans to release them. Someone Harry once trusted. And when she speaks, it will tear the royal veil open wider than ever before. Because Meghan has read the notes, and she's ready to respond. How do you fight back when the crown has slammed the gates shut on you? When the courts have ruled against you, the press is tearing you apart, and even your own family has gone radio silent. If you're Meghan Markle, you don't retreat. You retaliate. And not in a courtroom, not in a press conference, but on the biggest stage of all, Hollywood. Because while Prince Harry was spiraling emotionally in London, breaking down outside the courtroom, and watching the UK turn its back on him in real time, Meghan was already 10 steps ahead, calm, quiet, calculating. And make no mistake, she's not playing defense. She's launching an offensive. Let's start with the facts. Within 24 hours of the UK court ruling, Meghan was spotted at a private compound in Bel Air. Reportedly the estate of a media mogul whose name frequently appears in Netflix, Amazon, and Apple TV circles. She didn't use the front entrance. She arrived through a discreet side gate, covered by black SUVs. Her expression? Not angry, not shaken, not defeated, but composed, focused. According to a close associate, Meghan entered the meeting with what they described as a folder thicker than a script and a demeanor colder than steel. Inside that folder? Draft outlines, timelines, leaked excerpts from Charles's alleged diary pages, and a proposed title, The Final Lockout, My Truth from Inside the Gate. That's right. Meghan is preparing a full-scale media counterattack, not a royal response, not a legal filing, a narrative blitz, and it's been in the works longer than anyone suspected. According to a media insider with direct knowledge of Netflix's exploratory meetings, Meghan had already pitched multiple docuseries concepts months ago. All of them were soft, family-focused, or aspirational. But in the wake of the ruling, everything shifted. Suddenly, Meghan was no longer interested in resilience or community leadership. She wanted to tell the story. Her story. Harry's story. But with a twist. Because this time, the victim card wasn't enough. This time, she wanted to paint herself not just as the betrayed Duchess, but as the political exile. The woman shut out by an empire. Silenced by a centuries-old institution terrified of a modern woman with a microphone. Think about that for a second. While the royal family leans into centuries of silence and discretion, Meghan is planning to do the one thing they fear most. Break the fourth wall. Again. And this time, with stakes higher than ever. Insiders say she's looking to do something bigger than Oprah. Something serialized. Multi-part. Globally distributed. And here's where it gets especially explosive. The early pitch includes dramatizations. Yes, actual reenactments of the courtroom showdown, the sealed meetings, and even, reportedly, imagined scenes from behind palace walls based on verified insider testimony. Is it legally risky? Absolutely. Is it bold? No question. But for Meghan, this isn't just about reclaiming the narrative. It's about revenge. Because she sees what just happened to Harry not as justice, but as sabotage. She's reportedly convinced that senior royals, specifically and Charles, colluded with government officials to ensure the court ruling would permanently damage their public image. And that betrayal? It's personal. A source close to Meghan claims she's furious not just over the judgment, but over the silence. Not one word from Charles. Not even a message from William. She sees it as a final confirmation. The royal family never planned to welcome Harry back. But rather than wallow, Meghan is doing what she does best, produce. She's assembling a team. A-list director? In talks. Top-tier showrunner? Already locked. Streaming partner? Still weighing options. Amazon reportedly offering a multi-million-dollar bid with full editorial control. And the tone? Sharp. Serious. Politically charged. This isn't Harry and Meghan Part 2. This is Game of Thrones, Royal Edition. And just in case you think this is all talk, here's a bombshell. On the same day Meghan was seen meeting with producers, a trademark request was filed under an Archewell sub-brand. The name? The Exiled. Filed for television, books, podcasts, and merchandise. It doesn't get more direct than that. Now here's where things get even more dangerous. For the monarchy, Meghan is reportedly considering including actual leaked documents in the project. Emails, voice memos, legal correspondence from Harry's security team, and even snippets, yes, snippets, of what insiders believe to be pages from Charles's handwritten journal. How did she get them? Unclear. But a source close to the Sussexes says copies of Charles's diary fragments, first shared verbally by a former valet, have now been turned into proof. And Meghan allegedly believes those entries show emotional neglect, strategic betrayal, and royal hypocrisy at the highest level. She plans to use them, even if it burns every last bridge in the UK. Because here's the psychological twist. For the first time since leaving the firm, Meghan believes there's nothing left to salvage. That means no more tiptoeing, no more coded language, no more recollections may vary. This time, she names names. And what about Harry? Where is he in all this? That's the question no one can quite answer. Because insiders say that, Since the ruling, Harry has withdrawn deeply. He's spending more time alone, less time with Meghan's inner circle. One source described him as shattered, but quiet, like a man caught between burning the bridge and running back across it. Meghan, on the other hand, she's moving full steam ahead. Some say she sees this as their last great chance to control the legacy. Others say she's preparing for a future where she and Harry are no longer aligned. But here's the most telling move. Meghan has begun rebranding. Subtly. No more Duchess language and business correspondence. No references to titles on public platforms. Just her name, Meghan. Which raises the chilling possibility. Could she be preparing for an independent run? A public identity that distances her from both the British royal system and from Harry? We're not there yet. But the pieces are shifting. Because for Meghan, this court ruling wasn't a door slamming shut. It was a signal flare. A reminder that the monarchy is still playing dirty, and she believes it's time to go nuclear. So what happens next? Does Hollywood embrace this next chapter? Will the streaming giants back a direct war against Buckingham Palace? Or will the royals retaliate through legal channels, gag orders, and counter-leaks? The answer may already be in motion. Because just hours after the trademark for the exiled was filed, a second, lesser-known filing appeared in the UK legal registry, filed by a royal attorney, under a confidentiality clause. The subject? Unauthorized narrative recreation of protected figures. Translation? The palace is already preparing to fight back. They know what's coming, and they're scared, because Meghan isn't just releasing a statement. She's building a story, and this time, it's not a tale of love and fairy tales. It's a war cry, and when it hits the screen, even the Queen's legacy won't be safe. What happens when royal fallout becomes a generational fracture? When innocent children, born into the crossfire of a centuries-old monarchy and a Hollywood-fueled rebellion, are forced to carry the weight of choices they never made. Because as the British court shuts its doors on Prince Harry, and as Meghan Markle prepares her next media strike, two names keep getting whispered behind the scenes: Archie and Lilibet. And while neither child understands the tidal wave swelling around their family, the world does. Because the latest twist in this royal war isn't about titles or security. It's about identity. And one chilling line from the court's ruling has ignited a firestorm that now threatens to engulf Harry and Meghan's children in a legal, cultural, and emotional storm they never saw coming. Let's revisit the ruling. Buried deep within the judge's judgment, past the headlines, past the dramatic denial of police protection, was a subtle paragraph that most reporters glossed over. It read, "This court offers no comment on the secondary status of offspring born abroad to the claimant under current sovereign statutes and inheritance protocols." Now, to the untrained eye, that may seem like legal filler, but to royal insiders, it's a bomb. Because what the court just did, without fanfare, is raise a red flag over the future status of Harry's children. And it's more than symbolic. It opens the door for the UK Home Office and the palace to begin re-evaluating whether Archie and Lilibet are eligible for state invitations to official royal events, whether they hold legitimate standing in the line of succession should constitutional changes arise, whether their names and images can be used in future ceremonial documents, portraits, and national commemorations. In short, the monarchy just introduced doubt, deliberately, and it wasn't an accident. Sources say that in the weeks leading up to the final hearing, a mysterious new file was submitted to the royal legal team. The title? Status Clarification Request, Children of Duke of Sussex, Non-Resident. Even more chilling? It wasn't submitted by Harry. It came from within the palace. Let that sink in. While Harry was desperately fighting for the right to be protected in his own country, someone else was filing papers to question the legitimacy of his children's place in the royal system. And the motive? Control. Because if the institution can legally disassociate from Harry's offspring, they not only remove a long-term PR liability, they prevent future claims, dramas, or symbolic returns of the next generation. It's a preemptive strike, one aimed not at Harry, but at his legacy. And Meghan? She saw it immediately. According to insiders close to the Montecito inner circle, Meghan was livid the moment she read the fine print of the ruling. Her alleged words? "They're punishing my children for being born free." Let's pause there. Born free. Because that's how Meghan has always seen her children, not as heirs, but as escapees. Free from the scrutiny. Free from the monarchy. Free from the silent cruelty she endured. But the UK's latest move has made something horrifyingly clear. The firm doesn't see Archie and Lilibet as free. They see them as unclaimed. And now, both sides are gearing up for a battle over identity, bloodline, and royal inheritance that could stretch on for years. Here's the bombshell. According to one well-placed royal insider, Princess and Camilla have reportedly urged King Charles to formally strip Archie and Lilibet of their HRH-style titles.